Hi, welcome to the first episode of the Bookish Queer podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about graphic novels that are good for teenagers. Or, those pesky youths you can't keep off your lawn. So I work in a bookstore, and I've worked in bookstores for a few years now, two different ones. And the main reason why I wanted to make this episode about graphic novels that are good recommendations for teenagers is mainly because I had a coworker who works in our kids section didn't have a very good list, or he came to me for suggestions, so I made a list anyway. So I was like, I'll just go ahead and make that the first episode. That being said, the first comic on this little list I have is Batgirl of Burnside by Brenden, Fletcher, and Cameron Stewart. It's part of the New 52 series. The reasons why I like this new series so much, one of them is because of the color palette choices, which seems very specific, but I really like Batgirl of Burnside, the new Batgirl series, because it stands out compared to a lot of the New 52 that's out right now. I feel like right now if I go pick up the New 52, like all the art looks exactly the same no matter what the series is, except for Batgirl of Burnside being the first volume. The color palette choices are just really smart, and they blend well, and they just stand out compared to all the other New 52, which is exactly the same and gritty, but Batgirl of Burnside has like kind of soft colors. They're just nice. Another reason why I think this is a good recommendation is because you could give it to a reader who is new to Batgirl, or it's also accessible to readers who have read past Batgirl stories, because there's just enough cameos in this new series that as someone who kind of knew a bit about Batgirl's history, I was like, oh, alright, I'm into this. I'm glad that these little facts were thrown in. But it wasn't so much that if I had never read anything of Batgirl before, I would have been like, what is happening? Which is part of the New 52 thing. Is conceptually I thought it was wonderful. It's it's so hard to get into comics because the history of it is just so long. So I definitely feel intimidated trying to get into new things because I'm like, I don't even know where to start. But the new Batgirl does a really good job of, it is its own new story. New readers aren't going to be lost at all. But I definitely enjoyed the little throwbacks to previous, Batgirl's backstory, essentially. The last reason that I'm going to throw out there is for the villains in this new Batgirl series. They're unique, they're well done, and they're just interesting. They're well designed, and I'm happy to see this following in the tradition of Batman in that way, of having really cool, interesting villains, because when I got into Batman when I was a kid, or however old I was, that was probably my favorite thing about Batman, was I loved the villains. I never really cared about Batman as much. I was always just more interested in the bad guys. And Batgirl Burnside definitely has some cool villains. The motorcycle girls, their design is just fun. I love it. So, that's a short little bit, but those are my main reasons for being really into the new Batgirl. Why I think this is a particularly good pick for teens is because, for one, it's just, it sounds like weird phrasing, but it's appropriate. There's not an intense amount of gore. I think maybe there's some drinking, if I can't quite remember. I know there's a party, but there's not, copious amounts of substance use or whatnot. And Batgirl herself she's young. Pretty much everyone, not everyone, but a good amount of the main characters are young, so they're relatable in that way. And the use of technology in the comic is nice, and I sort of hesitate to say that because I feel as if there's this trend of, oh, we'll put some selfies in a comic and that means it's for teenagers and it's hip and the kids are gonna get with it. And it's definitely not like that. I think that the Batgirl comic just takes into account that these are things that exist and are popular in this world and the society we're currently living in. And they throw them in there, like there's uses of social media. So, you know, it's a comic for this age, but it definitely doesn't hit you over the head with like, oh, teens should get hip and with it, be into this comic. So that's why it's on this particular list of reads that are good for teens. Would definitely recommend it for teen girls too. It's centered around girls and they're all rad and I like them. The second pick I have on this list is In Real Life by Cory Doctorow. Technically it's not a teen book, but I think it could easily be a good read for teenagers because it deals with topics such as economics, and I say that as someone who once took an economics class and definitely just hated it, so don't let that deter you. Like, it is technically kept in the children's section of comic graphic novels, I believe, but just because it has some more conceptually mature or complicated themes such as economics, that's why I think it could be bumped up into being a read that would not be boring for teenagers. The second reason is just stunning art. Like, oh my god, this watercolor masterpiece. Like, just go Google some pictures of it. Worth it for the art alone. The last reason I like this, or generally just enjoy recommending it, is it's got fun girl characters. It's got girl gamers, which, you know, is always fun. It has a little conversation, very brief, about how it can be difficult for girl gamers or just, you know, being a girl in the gamer scene, and I appreciate that. So with all of those things, I put it on this list for teens, even though it's technically a kid's graphic novel. And did I mention the art? Because it's so cute. It's so good. Like, I know I said it, but oh my god, it's so good, dude. This art is so good. Alright, third up on the list is Young Avengers by Kieron Gillen. Kieron, you know the one. One of my favorite Marvel titles of all time. I specifically have the newer Young Avengers on here because the older one is a little harder to find. It's not impossible, and I know you can get it like straight from Marvel, but it is a little more difficult, so I just put this new one out there because it's the new one and it's easier to find. But the original comics is definitely what got me hooked on this series. I read those before I knew there was a new series. Gosh, I love Young Avengers so much. Kieron Gillen does other cool comics as well, worth throwing out there, so if you like Young Avengers, try picking up some of his other titles, because I've never read one that disappointed me. The characters in this series are teenagers, so, you know, pretty simple connection to make there, that it's a good read for teenagers. I love this comic a lot for its LGBTQ plus representation, making this the first graphic novel I've mentioned with queer themes in it, so good job me on my queer podcast. But yeah, the representation in this is well done, it's thoughtful, it's adorable, it breaks my heart. It's, you know, there's no tokens at all, it's realistic, it develops. Billy Kaplan is my son. Another reason, Kate Bishop is in it, and that's all you need, honestly, to pick up a comic book. I'll pick up anything with Kate Bishop in it. I feel weirdly pretentious saying it, but Kate Bishop being the new Hawkeye for people who don't know. I also love that the series not only has gay characters, but has at least one bisexual character as well. I feel like bisexual characters are not as prevalent, so I really like seeing that representation. I think even within the queer community, bisexual people just get, skipped out on, certainly in storytelling, but they can face harshness and just repercussions that they don't deserve, even within the LGBT community. So that was really nice to see. I think that comes in the second volume of the comic. It's been a little while since I read them, but that's a nice note as well. Again, with this series, not, copious amounts of gore. There's guns. It is a superhero series, so they do a lot of fighting, but I would definitely say it's appropriate for teenagers. It was made for a younger audience, so throwing that out there. But gosh, there's an infinite list of reasons why I love the Young Avengers. It's got humorous Lord of the Rings references, Kid Loki's snark, always fun, Latina Captain America, heartwarming use of true love saves the day trope, punching through the multiverse as a superpower, like literally punching through it. The main plot revolves around the son of the Scarlet Witch, Billy Kaplan, my son, which just makes for a excellent reality bending story. Just read it. I promise you will not be disappointed. Okay, actually, now that I've said that, you might be disappointed if you have read the older series. The new one, it does have a little bit of, it just, in the first volume, a little bit of annoying, okay, we get it, it's modern and for teenagers. But I think a lot of why I thought that was just because I'm so attached to the original Young Avengers comics that I just wasn't ready to get totally on board with the new stuff. But aside from that, you probably won't be disappointed. Very likely. I promise, kind of. The next, what is this, the fourth comic on this list is Scott Pilgrim by Bryan Lee Omalley. There is sex in the comics, so, beware of that. If you're a teenager, decide if you're fine with that. From what I remember, it's not particularly explicit, but it's there. There's also drinking. The story isn't, not really about teenagers. They're adults, so that's something to keep in mind. But other than that, I find myself recommending it to customers a lot who are looking for graphic novels for younger teenage boys. I think it just kind of fits that way because Scott Pilgrim is a boy, but I always loved the girl characters. I loved Kim. I like how it plays with the fourth wall in a way that's actually funny and not just annoying. It's well thought out. I do. And Scott Pilgrim's, I feel like it's really popular, so I don't know, it just makes sense to me to be on the list. It also has some queer representation. Gotta love Wallace, your favorite drunk homosexual. So yeah, all around, give it a try. It's pretty good. The next pick I have on this list is Being Puppycat by Natasha Allegri and Jackson Garrett. It's a graphic novel, so it'll vary when you look it up, but just the first volume of Being Puppycat. It's short story collections, lots of guest artists in there. It's great for fans of Adventure Time. It just kind of has a similar vibe to Adventure Time. I think it's great for young kids, teens, and adults because it's got magic and silly jokes, but also job hunting. So I think it spans across a lot of different age groups. The series touches on the magical girl genre, which I always love. I'm a sucker for magical girl stuff. And and it's filled with funny stories. The graphic novel spawned from the YouTube show, but you don't need to have seen the YouTube show to enjoy the comic. Each story within the comic is standalone. And, I mean, I just love it a lot because Bee, who's the main character, is so relatable. She groans a lot, she loves food, she struggles with adulting, and in one of the short stories, she gets so into a new coffee that she accidentally fills an entire room with the empty cups. So, same, Bee. I think it's, for that kind of reason, relatable to college students, but it's appropriate in every way for children, and I enjoy it as a young adult, so I think it's not too much of a jump that teens would enjoy it. I think I first watched the show, I can't remember when it came out, but it's, it's not, I don't think it would be a boring read for teenagers. It would be a quick read. I mean, they are just short stories and they're full of great one-liners, so it's not something that's going to take an older reader a long time to get through, but it's fun and it's feel good and the art's pretty cute. So, next up on the list is Super Mutant Magic Academy by Jillian Tamaki. I'll note right off the bat that there's pretty light, non-explicit underage drinking, drug use, and sex, but it's all brief and it's not intense. It's just funny. It is intended for pretty comedic purposes. And actually, the one part where there is underage drinking, one of the characters is very explicit about not putting any pressure on the other character to drink at all. So, I mean, kind of a heads up on that one, but I still think that it's appropriate. I mean, it's, it's individual opinion, but I would say it's fine for older teenagers, but it's whatever your opinion on that is. But basically, if you find hilarity in existential crisis, whatever, this is for you. I also enjoy it when skilled writers poke fun at genre tropes. I guess that's a little bit of a theme here, but Jillian Tamaki definitely does that with this graphic novel. I was just delighted by how every single page, like every time I turned the page of this graphic novel, the next little comic strip was just as thrillingly funny as the previous one. The reoccurring characters throughout the graphic novel were equal parts sad and engaging and terrible and admirable and so full of teen angst. I think that's part of why I want to put this graphic novel on my list of reads that would be good for teenagers, is because so much of it is about teen angst, and it's the fun kind of teen angst and not the annoying kind. It just adds depth to the characters, really, and it's wonderful. And if you pay attention, you will see queer themes in the graphic novel, so that is always a bonus. The entire graphic novel also takes place at essentially a high school for mutants and witches and monsters and the like, a little reminiscent of X-Men, but it is a high school, so the characters are mostly teenagers, so that's also why I lump it into list of graphic novels that are good reads for teenagers. Lastly, it's also a pretty thick volume, and I would kind of describe it as just a thick volume of wonderfully illustrated punchlines. So it's nice that it takes you a little while to chew on it, even though it is a lot of individual strips, like comic strips or individual pages. There's quite a bit of substance to it. Alright, my next pick is Miss Marvel by G. Willow Wilson, illustrated by Jacob Wyatt and Adrian Alphona, I believe. This one is so good for teens because, especially in volume 3, I believe, you can really tell that the creators want to tell stories that matter to teenagers. I feel that there's a little bit of a trend right now where graphic novels are just trying to grab at the newest market, like I was saying earlier with just putting selfies in something and thinking that that's going to be all that a teenager wants to read about. But Miss Marvel doesn't do that at all. You can really tell that the authors aren't just trying to appeal to another market. They're really telling stories that are going to matter to young people, and in some ways I would even say empower them. There was a little narrative where Miss Marvel was talking to a group of teenagers about, basically the shit that, I mean, the equivalent in real life was the shit that millennials get for just, existing. But it was a little mini speech that I thought was just wonderful. It was very touching. Also, considering that Kamala Khan, or Miss Marvel, is a fictional teenage girl, I think she's 16 if I remember right, that could be wrong, but considering that she's a fictional character, I look up to her a lot. She's really just someone who's trying to do the right thing for the people and the city that she cares about. One of her quotes, which in some ways kind of functions as like a tagline for Miss Marvel, sort of, but one of her quotes is, good is not a thing you are, it's a thing you do. And I think that pretty much sums up her character, and it sums up a lot of the feeling and the atmosphere of the comic. Kamala Khan / Miss Marvel is also in high school in this comic, so again, not a big jump putting this on a list of graphic novels that are good for teenagers. One of my favorite things about the series is that it's got a lot of humor, but there's also mixed in really emotional moments that made me almost tear up. See volumes 3 and 4, the thing with the cats, you'll know it when you get to it, really messed me up. It was so heart-wrenching. The next book I have picked out is Cursed Pirate Girl by Jeremy Bastian. Technically, this is another one that's kept, or at least we keep it, in the kids section of the graphic novels. And the main character is young. She's younger than a teenager, but I think it could easily be a teen recommendation because of the detailed art that really captures the eye and keeps your attention. It is very intricate, which slows down the reading, kind of, but in a good way. Also, the main character is pretty determined and/or mature for a young girl, so I think that teens could get invested in her. I can't remember quite exactly, but I think I read it when I was in high school, and I got pretty invested into it, so I don't think it's too much of a stretch to put that in a list of recommendations for teens. The theme of the story is the girl, the main character, is off on a wild undersea pirate adventure to find her lost father, and she's also a real big swashbuckler. It opens up with her dismantling, pretty much taking apart some other people. But again, because it's a kid's book, there's sword fights, but it's all pretty, mythical creatures, ocean villains, that kind of thing. Alright, the very last series I've got on this list is The Wicked and the Divine by Kieron Gillen. I will say it's a little bloodier than some of the others, probably a better recommendation for older teens. People's heads explode, so yeah, kind of bloody, but it's not particularly gory. The art style sort of softens the blow a little bit, but there is a lot of blood. So just putting that out there as an inherent warning, I suppose. The main character is pretty young. She lives with her parents, and the other characters are a little strange because there's a lot of adults in the series, but also a lot of the characters are reincarnations of God, so there is a character who's very young. She's sort of a child, but also she's a god, so she's not a child. So as far as the age ranges go, it is a little muddled in that respect, but I think having a main character who's pretty young makes it pretty relatable series for teenagers, which is one of the reasons why I put it on this list. I also have it here just because Kieron Gillen is a great comic author, in my opinion, who really knows how to work a plot twist, and I just, as I've said earlier, I like him a lot as a comic author, so I'm always happy to recommend this series. There's also, there's one transgender character, and there's at least one bisexual character, so queer themes, always a bonus. Love that representation. Some of the other characters, as far as I've read in the series, there could be more, but it's not finished, it's still going, so there's still room for development. The characterization of gods and their subsequent modification really fascinates me, and it's one of the things that brought me to this comic in the first place. Persephone, the Morrigan, and Amaterasu are just a few of the gods that are in the comic. Lucifer is in it and wears a Bowie-inspired suit, and the series has a little bit of glam rock in the aesthetic, which is pretty fun. And the LGBT characters they are thoughtfully developed. They have thoughtfully developed stories and also personalities, and they're just well written, which is something I enjoy because sometimes people can mean the best, and LGBT characters can just be poorly written or just done in a misrepresentation. And as far as I've read in The Wicked and the Divine, it's been wonderful. I've loved it. So that is the last recommendation on this list. And this has been the first episode of the Bookish Queer podcast. Feel free to leave a comment if you've got some other themes that you'd like to hear.